Welcome and thank you for joining our conversation today on Chicken Bites. In today's podcast, we're looking at local poultry production and how South Africa has become one of the most efficient producers globally. Balancing input costs with raising healthy broiler chickens is one of the major criteria. And so today, Heiko Koster of the US Grains Council joins us to unpack the topic. Welcome, Heiko. Thank you for joining us today. Please tell us what it is that you do in the poultry industry.
I'm a consultant. We have a consultant company, and we basically consult a big market share in South Africa on poultry nutrition, farming practices, feed mill management. Then we are very much involved in most of the SADC countries, also looking after doing the same formulations, mill management, optimizing poultry production per se. So that's my field as such. And then I also consult the US Grain Council. They've changed their name as US Grains Bio something Council. Sorry for that. But they've changed their name, and I consult them also in Sub-Saharan Africa on issues relating to US opportunities.
All right. So I wonder if you can tell us what goes into modern poultry feed and how do those ingredients support healthy, efficient broiler growth?
Well, if we look at broilers, the main ingredients, I would say 90% plus, is basically maize and soya meal. And then we have all the enzymes, the minerals and vitamins, and other ingredients that make up the last up to 10%, depending on the density of the feed. So those are the main ingredients that we use. In some areas, we use poultry byproduct, which is a product that's been produced by the producers themselves, and it's a high value protein fat product. Otherwise, if they don't use it, it will be a very costly implication on environmental issues. So those are the main ingredients that basically the whole region uses, and maybe worldwide, it's very common that we use mainly maize and soya, and then the other products as such. So when we look at that from a South African point of view, we've been fortunate over years that we've become very self-sufficient, specifically on maize and soya. At least the last 10 years. And that has made us also very competitive because most of our prices over the years, we have exceptions, are basically export parity priced. So our raw material prices have reached the same levels as what they have in the US and Brazil, and maybe a little bit cheaper. Quality-wise, we have very good products. The maize is all sun-dried. The quality is very good. We have a good grading system in place. Our farmers are very professional in terms of the production and storage. And the same applies to soya, our soya industry also. We're fortunate that we have this industry that has been developed in the last 10 years, new modern equipment. I would say some of the best equipment that is available for crushing. And we're seeing very good product coming out of the crushing plants, which also enhances production from a broader point of view. Specifically, when we compare our soya quality to the previous quality that we've imported mostly from Argentina, our quality is better, digestibilities are better, and that also gives us somehow a little bit of a competitive advantage as such.
So you've mentioned that the soy quality has changed over the years, but what in broiler production has changed dramatically over the past few decades in comparison to now?
Our first couple of things. I mean, we actually, if we look back, we pretty much use the same macro raw materials as such over the years. We understand the raw materials and the quality issues and the availability of nutrients much better. That had an impact, but I would say the biggest impact we've had over the last 40 years is the genetics of the animal. If I look at the performances 40 years ago and I look at the performance today, they are so different, so much more efficient. We're using so much less feed to produce a kilogram of animal protein as such. So on the genetics, I would say huge improvements. With that, I would also say The next issue that has developed over the years is housing. Most of the industry has moved over from open housing, where environmental control is very limited, to fully environmentally housing, where we can control the environment very much so that we make the animals much more comfortable and that they can produce much better. And then the last thing is, not the last thing is there two other things. The one thing is the kind of management that we have on these farms. We have to understand a lot of the farms are also contract growers. So the farmers as such have developed themselves, have employed much more skilled people to manage the poultry operations on their farms. And then the last thing is also from a technical point of view, I think we have world-class animal nutritionists. We have good input suppliers, which we haven't had 40 years ago. We have had a lot of research on new developments like enzymes, like probiotics, reducing the amount of antibiotics that we're using. So it's an additive effect, saying first thing is genetics, second is housing, thirdly is quality of management, and fourth very much is also the quality of the nutritionists. That has developed over the last 40 years. Those are the main issues, I would say.
Very interesting. So how has the time frame for a fully developed broiler chicken changed in terms of when they can, the turnaround time for slaughtering?
In 1984, plus minus, we were well above 2 kilograms of feed being used to produce 1 kilogram of chicken. Same weight, let's say around about 1.85, but slaughter age between 42 and 48 days. When we look 40 years later, we're basically now at under 1.4 feed conversion. So only use 1.4 kilogram to produce 1 kilogram of chicken. And the slaughter age is now plus minus between 30 and 32 days. So that's I think in short the huge development that we've had. Much more efficient, much faster, and we use less feed to produce 1 kilogram of protein.
That is really that is quite significant and quite remarkable. And this, I'm assuming, you've spoken about the genetics and so on. The genetics have obviously been optimized over the decades. This clearly doesn't affect the health of the chickens. They develop into healthy chickens within that, what did you say it was, 32 days?
Yeah, maximum about 32 days, yes. I think a couple of things. Many years ago, we had a lot of diseases. We had little opportunities of vaccinating. Our knowledge in terms of the diseases was reasonably limited to what we have now. So vaccination has started to become a big role player. I think one of the most common ones is Newcastle disease. I don't personally know when we last had a Newcastle outbreak in South Africa. So from a health point of view, vaccinations, looking after the animals has significantly improved. The second thing is biosecurity. Many years ago, we had open farms. Everybody could walk into those farms. There was no biosecurity really in place. And today, when we look at these environments, I'm not saying they're sterile environments, but they pretty much no individuals can enter a farm. They have to wash in and out or shower in and out. Vehicles are sprayed in and out. So biosecurity has become a huge issue. And then also we have to give a lot of credit on regarding our vets. Vets are now specializing in poultry health, and they are very much involved with the animal nutritionist in terms of looking after the welfare of those animals. Mortalities, I would say, even with the higher stocking densities and everything, you will see stocking densities varying, but they still around about 5%, 6%, which is basically pretty much the same, even if we have higher stocking densities. and the better genetics. We have also seen on the genetic side flip overs, lung diseases. A lot of that has been bred out of those animals from a genetic point of view, and that also has added a lot to the animal welfare from that point of view.
My last question is, South Africa has been positioned as the second most competitive poultry industry globally, which is really quite incredible considering the US, which was second, is much larger. Of course, they are also feeling the impact of bird flu in their various states there. But what factors would you say have enabled this level of efficiency for South Africa?
Yeah, I think from a looking and comparison between different countries in terms of efficiencies, one's got to be realistic that it's horses for courses. The US is growing a different chicken than what we have. They basically get them much older than what we have, and as they get older, they have a higher feed conversion rate. So from a feeding cost point of view, it becomes more expensive on their side. But we've got to look at the market. South Africa, which the biggest part of our population from a financial point of view are very much constrained. In the US, we have a very big fast food industry that requires certain size and big size of chicken. And that comes at a cost. But they also get compensated for that, specifically on the breast meat. Whereas in South Africa, the main consumption here is the thighs and the drumsticks, call it the red meat. So because of what people and customer preference that we have in South Africa, we need to feed those animals in a very short time. So we place much more chickens over the year than what the US does, for instance. But we've got to be fair that yes, we are efficient in terms of the kilograms that we produce, but our income is not the same as in the US. So when we look at efficiencies, it's only input efficiencies. If we look at return on investments, I think it could be another story with specifically on the US, looking at the breast meat, because they get 80% or 70 to 80% of their income is the breast meat, which is and they get premiums for that from the fast food industry, which is significantly bigger than our fast food industry. Whereas here, people are buying a lot of frozen meat. They're buying small portions because everyone or every individual in the family has to get a piece of meat. And that's why we have the smaller chickens. And it's a requirement of our market. So we've got to be fair, shorter. We have the same genetics as in the US, but we feed them shorter. So we get better feed conversions from that point of view. And we can stock more per square meter because they're smaller when we slaughter them. So it's horses for courses. There will be years that we will not be as competitive as others, and that's when we have a drought here. That's when we have a shortage of raw materials, and specifically our maize prices and our soya prices, instead of being export parity prices, will move to import parity prices. And we've seen that over the years. As soon as we get into that situation, our industry gets under a lot of pressure. It gets a lot of pressure in terms of profitabilities because the input costs are just so much higher. So we're very much exposed to that also compared to the US. But I think in general, and I mentioned those 4 points, that's where at the moment where we are very competitive, and we will keep on being more competitive, specifically on we're working on all those issues that do improve poultry performance, and it's getting better and better.
Indeed. It's really fascinating, and it's really encouraging to see that South Africa can be a leader in industries, despite the difficulties we've had as a country for the last decade.
Just shows you the resilience. But just a last comment, and you mentioned it, and I should have also said a little bit more about it, is about the AI. We're not going to eradicate AI, bird flu. As long as we have birds roaming all over, wild birds moving from continents to continents, from places to places. But we're not going to eradicate that. We are always going to be exposed to that. Biosecurity does help, but it's not a guarantee. So I think the industry is fighting also like they did many years ago in terms of Newcastle and other vaccinations to get our chicken population vaccinated, because I'm not a vet, I'm not an expert on that, but all I can say is from what I know and what we experience, we're not going to eradicate it, and we will have to move towards a dispensation where we can vaccinate to protect our industry. Otherwise, we are going to see huge problems over the years with AI, and that can, I don't think it's going to destroy our industry, but it's going to have a huge impact in terms of the profitability and the sustainability of basically the biggest animal protein production industry in South Africa.
Absolutely, Haiku. Bird flu is not going away. And I think that vaccinations will become a global standard, and South Africa can be no exception to that. But that brings us to the end of our conversation today. Heiko, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for being with us today. To our listeners, I hope that this was an informative discussion for you, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you, Jennifer. No, thank you. Appreciate it.